Hello, is this working now? Okay, is this working? Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome after the break. So you are actually? Okay. So what's your name? Okay, welcome everybody to the amazing panel that we're going to have right now. I hope you all had a wonderful break. I hope you've made some great connections. But right now, all eyes are on these wonderful participants. Please welcome Anthony Sassano, who's an I'm sorry, clap now. He's an independent contributor to the Ethereum space, and he'll be today's host. Then we have Ed Felton from Arbitrum. Next up, it's Alex Glukowski from ZK Sync. Next to Alex is Ben Jones from Optimism. Then it's Ohad Barta from Starkware. And we have a surprise guest. This is John Adler from Fuel Labs. Anthony, you take it from here.
Thank you. Is this working? On? Okay, cool. Hey, everyone. Great intros there. That was like my first thing. Like, everyone needs to introduce themselves, but I guess we don't have to do that now. Thank you for coming this morning to the panel. Our current role is sufficiently decentralized. Now, I want to ask a question before I get into it. Who of you cares about decentralization? Raise your hand. This is really surprising because crypto Twitter keeps telling me no one cares about decentralization, so that's really surprising. But anyway, cool. And also, I'm following on after Bartek just flooded every roll-up, so this is going to be fun. Anyway, so we're going to look at, obviously the current state of roll-ups. Are they decentralized? Will they be decentralized in the future? How are we going to achieve that? And we've got great panelists to kind of discuss that. And I think I'm going to be going just like to my left, and we'll go like that for the panelists. And each of you can answer this. But yeah, so I guess like the current state of L2s, in what, like first question, like what ways are they still centralized? Why are they like this? And do you think this is kind of like hampering adoption? Ed, we'll start with you.
Sure. I think each of us will have to answer for our own technology where we stand. Let me tell you what our attitude is about this at Arbitrum. First of all, we have a design which is designed for decentralization. That is that everything that you need to move to decentralization is in the design. That said, we do have what we call training wheels that are still in place, points of centralization. We have a prominent disclaimer about this at the top of all of our major pages, which you can find and read. So basically, we are gradually rolling out decentralization, gradually taking off those training wheels as we in our community get more confidence in the technology. So as an example, we have retained the ability to upgrade the software when needed on short notice. And we think that is a responsible thing to do in the meantime because of security considerations. Over time, we will move to add delay. Over time, we'll move to add a community approval mechanism and so on, but that's not something we're doing immediately.
So maybe we can begin with the question: what is decentralization? And because this is fundamentally defining what the process we're building around that. To me, it's something that says that the system is not controlled by a single entity, and your funds are not controlled by a single entity, and your ability to use the system is not subject to someone's limitations. And in this regard, I think all of the existing systems are fairly decentralized in a sense that everything that we built in L2 world relies on Ethereum for censorship resistance, of both optimistic rollups and ZK rollups today. To a large degree, so like I'm not sure about all, but like many of them are giving you this option to withdraw your funds and to move them away, maybe to a competing project or to a fork of a rollup without the permission of the operators. This, of course, like the biggest problem we have today here is the upgradability, and we probably should spend quite some time talking about this. because upgradability actually gives the operator this control. So this was a very big question for us. We started initially without the possibility to make upgrades immediately. We had a strict notice period of several weeks, but we had to retreat from there and introduce a security council. So a team itself cannot do immediate upgrades, but with a number of independent participants stepping in, we can do it for fixing immediate bugs, which is I think fundamentally a problem for L2 world, because immutability has this two-sided sword. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, we can talk about upgradability after this. Yeah. Go.
All right. Well, I just want to get into the meat of it, so I'll keep my answer very short. I think it's an easier answer to say what isn't centralized and what part is decentralized or whatever, right? I think the part that is true for everyone here, which is very important, is that all the data goes on Ethereum. And even if there aren't all the security mechanisms in place that are tying that with a dispute game or with a ZKP to what's going on, at least everyone can see an auditable path of all the transactions being posted. So even though there's a long way to go, Bartek is totally right, everyone is totally right, at least we've started with the thing that's most important.
Okay, so in Starknet, we are still centralized. We have currently single sequencer and a single prover, but we do realize that the value of decentralization is, in my opinion, much beyond letting people know all the data. I think that you have MEV questions will potentially touch that. You have a lot of other aspects that can influence, even if everything is proven or everything is audited by someone that sees the optimistic rollup, there is still a huge factor of allow anyone to sequence transaction. But that being said, it's a very sensitive topic, and it's really important to us to build the best product here, and we have active discussions with our community. We have a lot of shamans posts with decentralization ideas. Basically, currently, we are formulating our decentralization plans. We have trade-offs like block times. Is it 20 seconds? Is it 2 milliseconds? 2 milliseconds it won't be, but maybe 2 seconds. You have a lot of applications that strive to have 2 seconds finality time, right? But this directly collides with thousands of validators that are sufficiently decentralized. So we try to engage what's more important for the community and all the different aspects you can take. I think this is a great panel to discover it. And we plan to actually decentralize both sequencer and prover early next year.
So on the topic of Fuel v1, because our upcoming Fuel v2 is still under active development, Fuel v1 was the first optimistic rollup to be deployed to mainnet Ethereum. And on the two properties of can the block producers or can the sequencers steal people's money, and also can people always move their funds, is it censorship resistant, Fuel v1 is unique compared to other rollups in this regard because it is fully trustless. There are fully implemented fraud proofs that are live, and it also posts all its data to Ethereum. And in terms of can users still move their money, we actually allow users to permissionlessly create blocks. And this ties into what Bartek was saying earlier today in his long FUD speech around if you have a certain number of TPS, forced withdrawals aren't sufficient. You actually need users to be able to permissionlessly create blocks or do something like have a huge batch of transactions exit to another rollup. So that is something that Fuel v1 supports.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone. So yeah, I guess as Alex said, we should touch on upgradability. That's a pretty big centralization vector because if you have the control to upgrade the whole system, you can pretty much do whatever you want, at least from my understanding. So yeah, I guess each of you touch on your views on upgradability, kind of like time delays, how important they are, and I guess views for maybe potentially decentralizing that kind of part of the roll-ups into the future. I'll start with you.
Sure. Right. I mean, I think the path that all of us are aiming toward most likely is one that adds, first of all, delays for ordinary upgrades. Delays for ordinary upgrades, some kind of community approval. Security updates are the harder question, right? Because time is of the essence for those. And usually before deploying a security update, you want to hold somewhat closely information about what the vulnerability is. Right? And so maybe you're willing to share it with members of a trusted community council, but you can't have a big open community debate about whether the bug over there that is explained on that page that allows someone to steal everyone's money should be fixed, or how, right? So security updates are the hard part. And the question of what kind of delay to put on that, I think is a hard question. The other option that is available, which we've been looking at seriously, is a sort of emergency halt button, which can be deployed by some kind of community mechanism, which will stop activity on the chain in order to create time for a security issue to be remedied. Right? Obviously, stopping the chain is something that you would only do in an emergency. You'd want that to be a sufficiently decentralized process, but it's less dangerous than quickly deploying an upgrade. There's no really simple answer here, right? You want to be able to respond in a reasonable way to security issues if they arise. As we get more experience with all of these technologies, we will be able, the trade-off will shift, and the sort of distribution of possible harms, the probability distribution over possible harms changes. And so therefore, what is the best policy, I think, changes over time. And that's been our attitude, is we will be gradually relinquishing the upgrade power that we have.
I think Ed just brilliantly laid out the problem and solution paths, and we've been also looking into the security emergency stop button. The problem with upgradability is that after, when you have to make this decision for emergency, so for ordinary upgrades, it's pretty clear. So you can have your delay periods. Ideally, you would want every user to opt into upgrades in some future, but for now, delay periods of a really long time. We don't want to do upgrades every week. We can make it 1 month, 3 months, whatever. It's going to be sufficiently good if you have a really good mechanism for mass exit. Because if a lot of users don't agree with you, they should be able to exit and to go to alternative chain. And this is an analog of a fork of blockchain, of layer 1 blockchain. The beauty of a layer 1 fork is that a minority can also exit without the consent of the majority. And this only works for these ordinary upgrades. For emergency upgrades, you have much shorter times. And if the blockchain is halted, you need to come to some consensus, how to, either you unfreeze it in the current functionality, opening up the vulnerability to hackers to exploit, or you make an upgrade, but then how do you agree on this upgrade? What if the majority of stakeholders or of the users of the community is actually malicious? So how do you control the upgrade? Do you use token voting? But then what if there was a malicious takeover of the token? So this is a really hard question to which I personally don't have a good answer, and I really encourage, I think this is the most interesting question for the community, especially of technical community, inventors, developers, to think about and come up with ways to solve this particular thing. How do we protect the minority from the abuse of the majority?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I agree with a lot of what's been said. I agree that being able to halt the chain sounds nice, although I'm dubious that developers will implement the correct things to make that chain halt go smoothly a little bit. I will say one thing a little more explicitly, though, that I don't think has been said, which is that you basically have two choices with upgrades. You have a delayed upgrade or you have an instant upgrade. And the trade-off is pretty simple. If you have a bug on the chain and that is going to cause loss of funds, if you do an upgrade, which is instant, which is basically to say anytime less than the withdrawal period for your coins, then your upgradability is going to be able to react to that, assuming that you can fix it and catch it, et cetera. If the upgrade mechanism is delayed, say the community approves it and then a month later the upgrade's going to happen, 2 months later, whatever, then that does not give you the ability to solve for loss of funds bugs, because by the time the 3 months goes by, the funds are gone. So yeah, it is a tough question. I think in some ways that's just the fundamental property where you have to pick one or the other, and you're going to be stuck with it. And I think the last thing I'll say is that where we've come to sort of with this discussion for us is that there probably just needs to be multiple implementations. And you just try to limit the idea of a loss of funds bug that gets found the same way on every implementation. And by doing this, you can basically upgrade the one implementation that looks different, is giving you a different answer than the others. And this maybe will give you some more, solidarity or some more security. But I think that's fundamentally a trade-off, and it's just a tough problem. You have to deal with it.
Yeah, I agree with whatever was said before. You have really non-trivial trade-offs here. One thing I would say is it is new, because I agree with everything they've said so far, is that rollups are not the only one to handle these questions, right? Any application in L1 face the same issues. And in this context, we have a lot of great mechanisms to learn from, like how Maker are doing upgrades, how other are doing upgrades, how they treat like regular governance versus emergency upgrade. So I don't know what exactly the solution will come up with, but I guess it will be somewhat based and inspired from all of those approaches.
Sure. So to quickly speak on how upgradability is done in Fuel v1, there's no upgradability. It's completely immutable, like Uniswap v1. If you want to, use an upgraded version of the chain, you have to opt into a whole new chain. This is obviously not ideal in all cases. It has some benefits, right? It's completely immutable, completely trustless, but it has some downsides, which is what everyone here has talked about. Sometimes you might want to you might want to change it for a bug fix, right? In such cases, you really do want to be able to upgrade it in place. Like has been said in the panel here, this does apply not only to rollup contracts, but to other applications on a smart contract chain, right? Because the contract is what custodies user funds. If the contract has a bug, then user funds are at risk, and there's not really any way to avoid this. And this is different than something like the native token of a layer 1 chain, like Ethereum, right? If there's a bug in the Ethereum protocol, you can fix it with a hard fork. You can't really do this for an application. Now, that being said, there is kind of a slightly wider design space than just applications on top of an execution layer directly. You can build things like application-specific blockchains that run on top of a shared data layer, such as when ETH2 gets its data sharding, or even prior to that, when EIP 4844, the proto-dank sharding thing or whatever gets launched, then Ethereum will be able to provide highly scalable data availability throughput. Then you can actually have what I like to call sovereign rollups, where it's essentially a rollup or an application that uses the underlying chain for data availability, and only data availability, not settlement, and therefore retains the ability to soft or hard fork. And this means you can be much more responsive in how you respond to bugs, just like you would be able to in a layer 1.
Sounds like a hard problem. If anyone wants to challenge themselves, solve this problem for these fine people here. So, all right, so we've got about 10 minutes left. So I wanted to talk about kind of like the rough timeline that you guys could give for, I guess, decentralizing out every part of your kind of like roll-up, right? The sequences, the validators, the upgradability, all that sort of stuff. Or is there no timeline? It's just kind of like an ongoing process. It's kind of, maybe kind of looking at what the state of the ecosystem is, like what's needed for the ecosystem at any given point in time, and kind of just making it an ongoing process, and also involving the community with that. I know that, as Ohad mentioned, there's, at Starknet, they've been doing a lot of forum posts recently about, plans to decentralize and paths to decentralization. I'm sure this discussion has been had in your other communities as well. So yeah, is your view that it is kind of like an ongoing community-involved process rather than, more like a bottoms-up kind of approach rather than a top-down approach from you guys dictating to the community, okay, this is how we're going to decentralize, and you have to follow our path. So yeah, can you guys touch on that and how you view that?
Sure. We think of this as a process we'll carry on in dialogue with our community. In terms of what, and I'm not going to give dates, but probably no one will. But here's what I can say. Probably the next thing that we will decentralize is to open up the validation role to more parties. That should be happening quite soon. The upgrades are more difficult, and I think will be a gradual process, not just a single step, but kind of the process I talked about earlier. We'll be putting delays and more consultation in a more formalized way for ordinary upgrades, which you do need to do for an EVM compatible chain. As EVM hard forks, you'll want to do an upgrade to stay compatible. The other major piece of this is decentralizing the sequencer role. The sequencer already does not have the power to censor you, and you can get your transaction on chain no matter what, but the sequencer does have power to manipulate the order of transactions. And so we will be decentralizing that process by moving to a distributed sequencer over time. And that, of the technical changes that need to be made, that would probably be the one that we make last of all of these.
Yes, I'm also not going to talk about the dates. Do not put the pressure on the development team. It should, always coming from point of preparation. But I can give the timeline in terms of milestones. So for us, the milestone number 0 is what we have now is that it's a ZK rollup. So it's fully decentralized in the sense that you rely on Ethereum for exiting your funds, spare the security hedge mechanism. Or security like this emergency upgrades. The next step, which we're going to do, is we're going to launch ZK Sync version 2 with smart contracts, and we're going to add ZK Porter, which is a separate data availability layer, to provide a relief for rollup transactions. And it's going to be a volition solution where users can decide where their account is, and they can interact with each other. And we're going to decentralize ZK Porter validators. So the data availability is going to be secured by a number of what we call guardians, who are going to be actually more decentralized, or the aim is to make them more decentralized than Ethereum. So we're going to have thousands of validators keeping the state. The next milestone after that is going to be decentralized in the sequencer itself, because the sequencer, as Ed pointed out, can modify the order of transactions, but it can also do something way more serious. It can censor specific transactions or specific users or specific type of applications, which you want to prevent. You don't want to be in that position where the sequence is centralized and can be subject to political pressure or pressure by whatever other forces can be. So this is going to be decentralized by introducing a layer 2 consensus. And after that, the next step is going to be decentralizing the proof generation. And we're putting a lot of effort currently into building hardware-assisted proof acceleration based on FPGAs and GPUs, especially GPUs, because there's going to be a lot of GPUs freed up after Ethereum transitions to proof of stake. And all of this can be reused, and it's already sufficiently strongly decentralized in the hands of the users, not in the data centers, and this is really, really important to us.
Just we've got about 4 minutes left, so just go.
Okay, I'll talk really fast. I'll give a date, 2030. No, just kidding. Yeah, so, okay, I'll try to give a more creative answer because I feel like the answer is basically the same for everyone, which is, well, I'm not going to give a date, but the order of operations is validation and then sequencing and then making the upgrades slower. So I'll give a different take, which is for us a big sort of side path that doesn't necessarily come before or after that is decentralizing the development of the protocol. So everything that we're doing right now for our next release, Bedrock, is about making the diff from Geth as small as possible and making the code base as accessible as possible, because we need other people to implement it. Because it's our belief that the way to get real security and reach that holy grail of turning off your upgrade keys or making them very delayed requires that you completely have separate implementations of the protocol that don't have collisions and bugs so that you minimize the loss of funds. So there's my different take. Decentralize the development. Ow!
Okay, so I'll also not be in the template here because Starkware claimed to have a date for decentralization. Right now it's early next year, but if you were listen to our posts 6 months ago, it would be the end of this year. So it's a moving target. I'm not going to say that this date is by any way committing, but I think it is important to have at least internal data so we can judge ourselves and see how we progress and see that we continue. I think that system is decentralized just when everything is decentralized. Even if sequencers are decentralized but provers are not, if you have one prover, it can go home and tell the sequencer, okay, maybe your L2 consensus agreed to some order, but I hate OHAD. So no transactions from OHAD or I don't prove anything. So we view it as okay, we need to get there. Also, probably the consensus protocol would take into effect that provers need to be decentralized. And then we continue to basically debate in the next few months what is even decentralization Are examples like Solana and Cosmos decentralized enough? Do we want to adapt something? Do we want to write something from scratch? Obviously, this would affect the timeline as well.
Yeah, so I mean, essentially echoing what most people said here, that there's various things you can do to decentralize over time, but it's mostly a detail. It's not actually that important. I actually do want to point out that I agree very much with Ben that the kind of collaborative community development approach is actually important. This is one of the reasons why the Fuel Network starts from a spec-first approach, very similar to what the ETH2 what the ETH2 upgrade has done. I guess now it's just Ethereum or something. I don't know the name. Right where consensus layer. There you go. Right. So I started from specs, and then they made those very robust, and then they had multiple client implementations. So this is essentially what we're going for too, where we essentially have a specification of the Fuel protocol that anyone can implement a spec-compliant implementation of, and we can actually have multiple implementations being built over time. So I think that is very important. And in terms of timeline, I would say soon.
All right, thanks everyone. I wish we had more time here because there's so much that we could cover, like MEV and things like that. But I'm gonna kind of give you a bit of a curveball question here. You don't have to answer it because you didn't answer my timeline question, so I don't expect you to answer this either. But when token? You don't have to answer that if you don't want to. That's all right. I mean,
check the Optimism blog and Twitter for all official sources.
That's all right.
Yeah, right. I mean, the token is there if you need the token. If you don't need, like, some applications, some rollups do not need the token, and they maybe should not introduce it. Like, zk-Sync will need a token for zk Porter because, like, it's an essential part, inherent part of the protocol. So, like, once that functionality is going to be released, we will have to introduce a token. So, yeah, it's a necessity dictated.
When airdrop.
When Binance. All right, cool. I think that's it. I think we're out of time now. So thank you, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed the discussion. And thanks to all the panelists.
Yeah, we're totally out of time for the panel, but I just want to say the panel was amazing. And I don't know about you guys. I just want to get a quick feel. Are you guys excited? Okay. I'm very happy to hear that. The conference is going to continue in like 5 minutes. And next, because Ohad actually agreed to both speak on the panel and then do a talk. So
he left me no choice.
Yeah. So he agreed. We'll be back.